important to some people than it is to other people. I've often referred to, and I think in my sermons at Cummer, previous sermons at Cummer Avenue, to an author by the name of Marcus Borg, who is the late Marcus Borg now. And in his book, Reading the Bible Again for the First Time, Borg says that being a Christian, living a Christian life, is not so much about believing as much as it is about cultivating a relationship with God, and by association, a relationship with other people and with all of creation. And Borg uses an interesting analogy that I have found helpful to illustrate this. It's an image that he borrows from Buddhism. Buddhists often speak of the teaching of the Buddha as a finger pointing to the moon. This metaphor helps to guard against the mistake of thinking that being a Buddhist means believing in Buddhist teaching, that is, believing in the finger. Instead, one is to see and to pay attention to not the finger itself, but to that to which the finger points. So if we take that analogy and apply it to the Christian context, for example, thinking about the Bible. For Christians, the Bible is like a finger pointing to God. Now, some Christians make the mistake of thinking that being a Christian is about believing in the Bible, believing in the finger, rather than seeing the Christian life as a relationship to that to which the Bible points, a relationship with God, with the Spirit, the divine, the sacred, whatever kind of language you want to use to describe that. Being a Christian is not about believing in Christianity, it's about a relationship with God. Or we could talk about Jesus. Do you believe in Jesus? Some people might ask. Well, for those of us who grew up in the church, believing in Jesus too often meant believing things about Jesus. That he was born of a virgin, that he performed miracles, that he was divine, that he rose from the dead. But now I see that believing in Jesus means something very different from that. And the difference is explained by looking at the root meaning of the word believe. To believe did not originally mean believing a set of doctrines or dogmas or teachings or articles of faith. In both Latin and in Greek, the root of the word belief means to give one's heart to, the heart being the self at its deepest level. So believing does not mean giving one's mental or intellectual assent to something, but involves a much deeper level of the self. Believing in Jesus does not mean the same thing as believing things about Jesus. It does not mean believing in doctrines and creeds and statements of faith about Jesus. Rather, it means to give one's heart to give oneself at its very deepest level to the teachings, the ministry, the values, and the example that Jesus embodied. As the writer of James says in our reading from this morning, believing something is really no big deal. It's no big whoop. So you believe in God, he says, so what? Even the demons believe in God. What's important, he suggests, is what we do after we say, I believe. There are at least a couple of problems. Well, there are a lot of problems, but there are at least a couple of problems with this emphasis on belief as a test of our commitment to the Christian faith. And the first problem is that it is virtually impossible to verify belief. By their very nature, beliefs are subjective and personal. I, as an individual, can take steps to verify someone's honesty. I can test the trustworthiness of a mechanic or a surgeon or a plumber by various means. I can ask other people about their experience. I can ask for a reference. And I can study the claims made by this scientist or that mathematician. But how do you verify the existence of God, or even falsify it for that matter? And the answer, of course, is that you can't. The paradox of this is captured in the words of the father who brought his sick child to Jesus to be healed. And this is a story that's told in the Gospel of Mark. And remember, the father says as he presents the child to Jesus, he says, I believe, help my unbelief. Probably the most honest and transparent expression of faith in the Bible. And the second problem, I think, is far more serious than the first, and that is the consequences, the actions of those people who make claims of absolute truth in the name of God. An author by the name of Charles Kimball, in his book, When Religion Becomes Evil, describes 5 warning signs of religion becoming corrupt. The first of those 5 warning signs is making claims of absolute truth. Every religion makes claims about what it believes to be true. Every religion has a collection of beliefs which form the foundation of their faith, and that's fine. But when particular narrow interpretations of these claims become not opinions, but declarations requiring uniform consent and are treated as rigid doctrines to which you have to pledge allegiance or you get booted out, then that, says Kimball, that is a problem. That is a warning sign of the corruption and the evil that will surely follow. And of course, what is lacking in all of these rigid and uniform systems of belief is, in a word, one word, what's lacking is humility. The recognition that we human beings are limited in our understanding and our articulation of religious truth. Fundamentalists of all stripes, religious fundamentalists and atheist fundamentalists, conservative and liberal fundamentalists, would have us believe their version of the truth to be the only truth. But experience teaches us that the most basic truths in any religion make all kinds of assumptions and include all kinds of interpretations. And sincere people of faith can and do hear and interpret truth in substantially different ways. Human beings are subjective. We're conditioned in ways that we're not even aware of. The fact that I was born in the early 50s, in the midst of the post-World War II baby boom, and I was raised on a farm in rural Ontario of Scottish Presbyterian United Church stock, All of those things have molded me in ways that I may never fully understand. My background and my worldview shape the way I look at the world. They shape the way I ask religious questions. And this isn't bad or wrong, it just is. But it does mean that my experience, that my understanding of God, however powerful and however life changing and however meaningful they are for me, do not exhaust all of the possibilities. And this is true for all of us. Marcus Borg, once again, reminds us that the way of Jesus challenges us to move from what he calls secondhand religion to firsthand religion. And he describes secondhand religion as a way of being religious that's based on believing what we've been told by other people. It consists of thinking that the Christian life is about believing certain things, about believing what the Bible says or believing what the doctrines of the church teach us. That's what he calls secondhand religion. Firsthand religion, on the other hand, consists of a relationship to that to which the Bible and the teachings of the church point, namely, the reality that some of us call God. I would like to suggest this morning that we change the emphasis in Christianity from belief to practice, from orthodoxy to orthopraxis, from believing things about Jesus to being followers of Jesus. So, what's the point of religion if it's not solely about what we believe? Well, I would like to suggest that maybe it's more about a frame of mind. Maybe it's more about a mindset, a way of thinking, a worldview that is much more about being curious and asking questions than it is about finding answers. In the words of the hymn writer David Bjorlin, maybe it's more about asking the complicated questions, about seeking the disconcerting answers, about knocking on doors of new ideas. For in the struggle, he says, we discover truth, both simple and profound. In the knocking, asking, seeking, we are opened, answered, found. Thanks be to God.